Welcome. Let's focus on this edition of Down to Earth for October 16 to 31st. Now, the very first topic is a very interesting topic, and that is revival of the Sukha Paika River. Now, Sukha Paika River was dry for more than 70 years. This is a 28-kilometer tributary of Mahanadi, and what happened was it used to witness severe floods every year. So, in 1952, government artificially blocked the mouth of the river, and then there was Hirakund Dam, which was created where the barrier remained, and it actually supported nearly 425 villages separately. But over the years, the river was choked, it was barren, and lots of weed was accumulated. So it was under the inspiration of Dr. Pratap Chand Rath, who is a Hyderabad-based cardiologist, a native from Bodhpur village, who actually brought people together to unite, with more than 425 villages uniting together, with 5 lakh people benefited with it, more than 8,000 petitions signed for its revival, and 50 crore rupees being sanctioned for the revival of the river. Finally, after 70 years, the Sukha Paika River has been restored. So, as we said, the timeline we have known, it was blocked by the government in the early years because of flooding in Mahanadi, and then there was a slow decay of the river which impacted the fishery, the farming, and the daily routine life. In 2019, there was Save Sukha Paika Abhiyan, which was launched, and this actually brought in or united the various villages together. There were administrative and legal actions that were taken, and finally the campaign approached the National Green Tribunal, bringing in the approval from NGT. Odisha government had to sanction 44 crores for the revival of the river, and finally this river has been revived by the help of community empowerment and bringing in ecological and agricultural revival. The next is the southwest monsoon. This time there has been a sudden shift in the southwest monsoon with withdrawal, which has led to significantly high rainfall and affecting the agriculture in the western India, specifically the regions of Punjab, which we would witness in a while, and floods in the east. So there was an early start of the monsoon that started before the schedule. The withdrawal started, there was retreat which was there, and finally the monsoon withdrawal took place. Now, under the disruptions, we have seen that more than 6.8 million hectares of kharif crop has been affected. The major crops which have been affected includes rice, cotton, pulses, and sugarcane, and there has been a widespread damage with more than 17 fatalities, 100 plus landslides, and 370 millimeters of rainfall in Jalpaiguri, which was an exceptional amount in just 24 hours in the month of October. There had been critical flooding on National Highway 10, creating a disruption of the supply chain. Now, if we focus on what was the overall scenario under the southwest monsoon, we would see there was a persistent low pressure in the Bay of Bengal, which channeled a continuous monsoon in central India. Then there was development of the cyclone Shakti, and finally this was disrupted with the retreat, and finally there was, as a result, intense rainfall in a very short period. Now, India has witnessed an agrarian crisis. 2023 National Crime Records Bureau talks about the higher suicide rates and accidental deaths in the agricultural area, and this data constitutes to nearly approximately 500 cases of farmer suicide, and suicide cases of nearly 600 for agricultural laborers, which account for a very high figure. The major proportions have been seen in Maharashtra, followed by the rest of the nations, and there have been a higher health crisis with increase in 3% deaths because of illness, 10% sudden heart attack increase, and 59% sudden increase in the abortion related deaths, which has created a nationwide series of mental health disorders and mental health crisis among the agrarian population. Now the cause of the environmental deaths are because of lightning, animal attack, or another environmental cause. It could be any environmental cause which excludes traffic or other road accidents. The next is the source for clean energy. Now clean energy, solar and wind are the major two ones. There has been an increase in 33% in solar and a consistent growth in wind energy. We have seen a historic tipping point where a 50% increase, more than 50% increase in renewable share of electricity generation has taken place versus the coal in 2025, the first half of it. Also, the dependency on fossil fuel. India and China have dependency on fossil fuel which is relatively lower as compared to US and Europe, and we are trying to have a green leap. Now China again has seen a 2% drop in fossil fuel and a dominant contribution in renewable energy sector. By 2030 we are projected to have a capacity of more than 10 or 9 terawatts of global energy, which is a projected global energy forecast with a mix from solar as a major proportion, followed by wind, followed by hydropower, and a small amount by bioenergy. The next one is the only active island, the Barren Island in India, in Andaman, and this was initially documented in 1832 when the volcano actually remained dormant for an extensive period of 159 years and then awakened. Now if we talk about the volcanic activity, it was first seen in 1787 to 1832, then it awakened in 1991, and in 1994 it entered a phase of frequent periodic eruptions. So we have seen the changes in the eruption patterns, as we can see. So Barren Island has shown consistent activity since then, and every decade we are trying to monitor the volcanic activity at Barren Island. Now there has been a connection. This volcano was dormant. However, the large volcanic eruption leads to more sulfur and ash content, which blocks the sunlight and creates a temporary global cooling. However, if we talk about the climate influence on volcano, we would see the melting of the ice cap reduces the pressure on the crust, where the magma would move upward and there would be more further eruptions than before. And that is the hypothesis which says that global warming could actually affect the volcanic activity. On the other hand, we have another hypothesis which says that larger volcanic eruptions create a global cooling effect because they block the sunlight which is reflected. Jane Goodall, one of the major pioneers of National Geographic, actually was a pioneer who worked with primates, and with 60 years of research, the work started in 1960s. There was 91 years of life which was dedicated to animals. Born in London in 1935, created landmark discovery that chimpanzees make and use tools, and talked about the uniqueness of the chimpanzees similar to human behavior. Then there was a long research on wild animals, specifically primates. Her specialization was primatology. She was an advocate of primates and conservation. She established the Jane Goodall Institute, and under which there was root and shoot program, and finally she left behind a legacy on primates and the study of primates with qualitative observation, ethnographic study, empathy in science, and long field work. There has been various institutions across India and globally who have paid specific tribute to her and have worked significantly with her. So tributes came from Narayan Sharma, Cotton University, Iqbal Malik, Sindhu Radhakrishnan from NAIS, Bangalore, and the related faculties, right? So innovation in science, creating human-animal bond and conserving the animals, the primates globally, was one of her major efforts. Very well activist of National Geographic as well. The next is Punjab underwaters. We have seen that in August 2025 there was severe flooding in Punjab, and this has shattered the agricultural crops with more than 2,500 villages submerged and an economic loss of more than 20,000 crores to India. There has been farmers who have affected the worst, with more than 4 lakh farmers being affected and creating a total destruction of the agricultural crops, significant destruction of poultry, and a small amount of large animals which perished, with more than 36,000 animals, poultry as well as large animals, who actually wiped off the income sources from the families. So this flood led to an economic devastation and a systemic failure, with insufficient aid, no insurance and corruption, which has affected the roots very significantly. So the flooding events, creating more catastrophic events year by year, are affecting the families and the supply chain. So essential supplies have been brought in the form of food, water, medicines to the villages. Reinforcement has been done with the help of civic authorities, and direct family assistance has been given to numerous families. Now again in Maharashtra, Marathwada, we have seen a very significant monsoon season in 2025. Much higher than normal rainfall, which ranges somewhere at around 640 millimeters. This year it was 890 millimeters, and there was a volatile monsoon season with erratic monsoon patterns, as you can see, creating a swing and an extreme of deficit and extreme surplus, which was one of the major reasons for devastation. So 29 of the 36 districts in Maharashtra were affected. Worst affected was the Marathwada district, with more than half of the crop area being entirely destroyed, and this was a case of extreme vulnerability, where the financial reserves of the farmers have been ruined to a great extent. And this is one of the stories of one of the farmers from Beed district. Then there are some of the cases that we understand why this is happening. So the major idea is the seas get warmer, so there is a persistent low pressure in Bay of Bengal. As a result, there is a persistent inflow of clouds for a short duration, with very high amount of monsoon, that the precipitation that they would cause, leading to intense and erratic rainfall. Now over the years, we have seen the estimated restoration cost per acre is nearly 50,000, and it takes 3 to 4 years to regain the soil fertility. So there has been a state compensation package of 31,000 crores which has been given. However, crop insurance, pre-sowing, post-harvest losses are not covered, and the extreme weather events are excluded, which leads farmers into extreme misery. The next is the production gap. After nearly 10 years of Paris Agreement, government's fossil fuel plans are not aligned with the global goals. By 2030, government aim to have more than 120% more than fossil fuels in comparison, with limiting the warming to 1.5%. So the surplus pathway, if we talk about for coal, for oil and gas, all are way ahead, and this are around 1.5 pathway, and this is the 2.2 degrees Celsius pathway, and the gap has been growing with increase in the coal production, increase in gas production by 5%, and what is being driving this increase is Brazil, which has nearly 47% increase in oil production, Nigeria doubling the oil targets, US and Saudi Arabia continuously extracting oil and gas, and India and China, which have lots and lots of state-owned enterprise, are slowing the planned production of coal. But just two nations with slower coal growth won't focus on, and the current emission rates The carbon budget for 1.5 degrees Celsius will be gone in just 3 years, and therefore there is a situation of extreme emergency which has to be maintained. The next is National Biodiversity Authority. It has failed to compensate the local communities with less than 27% of the disbursement to the beneficiary which has been given, and 163 crores which is still unallocated and undispersed. The funds from National Biodiversity Act goes to state biodiversity boards, and finally the local ones, and 95% of the funds are received. The remaining are still not dispersed. So community farmer, the intermediary, the wholesaler, the trader and the company, there is a long chain, and if the chain is broken at any point, this could lead to significant damage. For example, we have a case study of red sandalwood. Now red sandalwood contribute nearly 1000 crores, and the beneficiary for 2/3 of this amount are still untraced. And again, there has been an unintended consequence, which is unallocated funds are now in the fixed deposits, and 50% of the interest is earned by the companies. The next is ultra processed foods. Now ultra processed foods are the ones which are highly addictive and silent driver of global health crisis. Nearly 14 to 20% of the adult population is focusing on ultra processed food in one form or the other. Now some of the epidemics we could see in number is highest being the ultra processed foods, alcohol, tobacco and ultra processed food addiction in children and adult both have been cited together, with children at a prevalence of 13%, adult at a prevalence of 17%, both very high. And the ultra processed food is dominated in US, UK, Canada and Australia. And then if we talk about the carvings, if we talk about a processed food versus a ultra processed food, for example, a homemade samosa versus a packed frozen samosa. The homemade samosa would have flour, potato, peas, salt and oil. However, an ultra processed frozen samosa would have modified oil, flavor enhancer, stabilizer, preservative, anti-caking agents and hydrolyzed proteins. All of this are significantly harmful for an individual health. Again, for the tobaccos, we are talking about the big food industries and how they are using the strategies. There are various tactics which combine the nicotine with a palatable form, and then they acquire the food brands, for example Philip Morris or RJ Reynolds, to purchase major food companies. Then these use food science to find a perfect mix of salt, sugar and fat, and then there is aggressive marketing to promote cheap palatable food in the global market, which could be better used by the individuals. So if we look in India, 2006 to 2019, there has been a rise from 0% to 40% in ultra processed food consumption, very high in urban men, urban women, followed by rural men and rural women. And what is on the plate is actually now sweet biscuits, chocolates, ready-made foods, salty crackers, beverages, cereals and breakfast in a very small amount. And this has been a way towards addictive ultra processed foods which are seen. The next is H1B visa. Now China tops the top 10 comparisons have been seen with India versus China, and if we look onto the H1B visa dominance, the highest has been with 71% from India, followed by China, Canada and Philippines, and the highest visas have been granted. Now India's approach has been reactive, China's approach has been proactive, because China focuses on repatriation, strategic initiatives where thousands talents plan, and K visas are being launched to strengthen the student intake in China itself with more of domestic investment and better leadership. In India, we are focusing on a reactive approach where we are focusing on exports, lobbying, talent drain and minimal repatriation. There has been a proposed change in the fees structure. However, the existing ones and those who are shifting the visas have been exempted, but it is highly applicable for all new ones. The next is right to information. Right to information, there have been nearly 67,000 applications which have been rejected uprightly in last year, and this has been the highest ever record so far. Now, this was brought in 2005 with an idea to empower individuals to get government information. There was a ruling by Supreme Court under Girish R. Deshpande judgment which talked about privacy exemptions, restricting access to public servants, personal information, and setting a precedence for denial. Then there was a government amendment in 2009 which talked about gaining power to set tenure and salaries of information commissioners. And finally in 2023, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act was brought, which narrowed the disclosure by expanding the definition of personal information, and therefore there was an easy way to bring in higher refusal. There are more than 4 lakh pending cases still, and this has been an operational paralysis. The urban residents are, there is a less population in urban areas who is aware about it, but a significant population is still unaware about the pendencies and the rejections in the right to information. So bringing in independence, amending the legislation, bringing in better operationalizations with filling up the vacant positions, digital records, and streamlining the backlogs that have been created are important, and more importantly protecting the whistleblowers. The last one today that we would be talking about is a farmer's story which focuses on the national crisis which is fueled by climate change. So there has been a vanishing generation. Every single day there are farmers who are quitting the fields, with nearly 2,000 farmers who quit the field on a daily basis, and there has been an accumulated debt of nearly 3 lakh rupees which has been mounting on the farmers. If we talk about the Pit Bhasha's 10 years of harvest cycle, it was just 2 years of successful outcome with 8 years of failed crop, and this is one of the farmers from Odisha who sees that the future with farming is no more safe, and there has been a broken cycle. Why? Because there is sowing, there is growth, and then suddenly there is an erratic rainfall which creates stunted growth or creates or destroys the farm, and ultimately the harvest is not good. So per week, per month, and per year, if we talk about the crisis, there has been a higher number of farmers exiting the farm field every year, and this creates a big question on India's agriculture, which is one of the major contributors to GDP in India. So thanks for joining. Of course, we will be covering Down to Earth on a regular basis. Along with that, Yojana and Kurukshetra are also covered on a regular basis. Wish you all the best for your upcoming prelims. Stay tuned. Have a great day.